I begin in the name of the God whose mercy is profound, whose kindness is forever. I am beginning a series of presentations. The title of the presentations is Why Islam? This first episode of Why Islam is entitled Why Islam? In other words, I will try to explain to you why is it that I have chosen this particular title for introducing the concepts of Islam that I believe need to be clearly understood by people who would want to know Islam, either as non-Muslims or even as Muslims who are not as yet fully convinced about Islam. The story begins when I was young, from that period. As a teenager, I was not particularly interested in the religion that I got from my birth. I was a born Muslim, but I had very little interest in Islam. My family was not particularly religious. My mother was religious, but not my father. In the surroundings, I found most people I interacted with were not into religion in a big way. I found it difficult to continue with the pleasures of life, the excitements that life had to offer to me, to continue to enjoy them and also be religious. So I found religion and attachment to religion an impediment, an obstacle in the way of freely enjoying whatever life had to offer to me. But then it so happened that when I was not as yet 19, my father died all of a sudden. I was so emotionally attached to him, strongly, that his death was something that caused me to revisit my understanding of life. For a short while, I was not interested in living anymore. There was only one question that I was obsessed with. And the question was, has my father perished? Is he gone forever, eliminated from existence? Or is it that he has been transferred to a different world, as religious people say? So I started reading the Quran. Why? Because obviously that was the first source, the immediate source that was available to me for me to be able to find an answer to this question. I think the trick had already been done because of my willingness to understand the Quran, my keenness to know the answer to the question, where has my father gone? I discovered a new world. How did I discover it? What phases did I go through? What difficulties did I have? All these questions are hopefully going to be covered in this series of lectures. I was doing my Bachelor of Commerce degree when I converted. I transformed into a religious person. And obviously, to begin with, I was keen to learn about religion, no matter wherever from I would get information about it. However, I continued to study commerce and then business administration. And after having done my MBA from the Punjab University, I did a few jobs here and there, and then finally ended up in the teaching profession. I was employed as a lecturer in the Department of Business Administration, Punjab University. I wanted to be a good teacher only because I wanted my students to learn about Islam, even though I was not teaching them anything about Islam. But it so used to happen that I would take keen interest in teaching the courses that were assigned to me, like business communication and report writing, economics, at times business law as well, etc. But while I used to be teaching those subjects, I would be interested in those students in particular who would also take interest in a class, weekly class that I would take. Obviously, that class would not be mandatory, but I would always make sure that when students come to the university, they are offered one weekly class that they could join if they would wish to. The title was Islamic Orientation. Then it so happened that I got the opportunity of going for doing my PhD, which I did from the University of Wales, and I chose Islamic banking. In fact, it was a critique on Islamic banking that I wrote as a consequence of the research that I did. The idea was not quite as much to be able to do research in Islamic banking as it was for me to be able to do research and study more about Islam and somehow get the opportunity of teaching Islam. And it worked. When I came back to Pakistan after 4 years in 1994, I continued to serve the Punjab University, but very soon I got an offer from Lahore University of Management Sciences, LUMS, for me to teach Islamic studies to their BSc students. So from there on started the journey of teaching Islam in a formal way. When I imagined what kind of course I'm going to design for the purpose of enabling a youngster to be introduced to Islam, I came up with a design which was very similar to what I'm going to be presenting before you. I felt that the most important area of concern for all intelligent youngsters is to be able to get answers to their questions. So when I was designing the course, I was really interested in letting the contents of the course include the kind of teachings of Islam which would help students to know that the message of God is actually answering their questions. I kept on telling my students whenever I would have a new class that in this particular course, you will get answers to the question why. And the reason why this is going to happen is, well, there are two reasons. One reason is that as intelligent human beings, we want to get answers to the questions that come to our mind. Why does Islam say this? Why is it that we have been asked to do certain things like that? What is the reason behind believing in certain things, etc.? So, in order for somebody to be convinced about a certain point of view, he or she needs to get answers to the questions that are bothering the mind. But I would tell my students right at the beginning that the other reason why in my course they would find answers to the question why is that that's what the Quran does. I mean, the Book of God answers questions. The questions that come to your mind are answered by the Quran. So I'm not going to do anything on my own. I'll be just presenting what the Quran says. That's what has led me to now feel very strongly that it needs to be put across to a bigger audience. My conviction is that if we are prepared to present the contents of Islam the way they have been presented, through the arguments that the Almighty Himself presents in a proper way, in the contemporary languages which people understand, there is no way you can stop the message of Islam from spreading. Now, when I say that the message is going to spread, I don't mean that people are going to convert to Islam in large numbers necessarily. Honestly, I never think it to be a target, an objective. It could be an end result, a consequence. But my purpose is, our purpose should be, anyone who wants to serve the message of Islam, his purpose should be to focus on communicating the message of Islam the way it is, politely and patiently listening to the questions, criticisms of others, and then responding to them as academically and politely as possible. There is nobody in this world now who can claim that he or she is receiving message from the Almighty directly. What we are doing now is trying to put across our understanding of what the message says. Therefore, it is absolutely essential that we be humble, polite in our presentations. Why? Because we are ordinary human beings. Why? Because we may not be absolutely right in what we are saying. So we need to continuously review and revisit our understanding and allow others to help us in doing it. And I must also tell you that this journey that I went through was, I was greatly helped, facilitated by my teacher, my mentor, Javed Ghamdi. He was the one who encouraged me to continue to explore the difficult, complex questions that I came across. I remember a long time ago when I went to him with a complaint, with a fear. I told him that I was very fond of the books of Bertrand Russell. Bertrand Russell was a famous philosopher of 20th century. He would write beautifully, and he was an atheist. I told Ghamdi Sahab that I'm really fond of his writings, but I have a fear that if I would continue reading him, I might endanger my faith. And he very clearly said to me that you must continue reading him. If you are going to abandon reading his books simply because you fear the possibility that in doing so you will lose your faith or weaken it, then be absolutely sure that this is going to happen if you don't read it. Because thoughts would come to your mind, Satan would tell you that you are not even able to face Bertrand Russell's arguments. How can your faith be correct? And, it paid off. It was, I think, a very important, valuable piece of advice that I got from him. Not that it was the only one. There are many others that I got from him, but it really paid off. I remember that thereafter, when I went through the reading of the Quran over and over again, and after having been taught the Quran by Mawlana Amin Islahi and Javed Ahmed Ghamdi Sahab, it was not possible. And let me add Dr. Israr Ahmed Sahab too, because towards the first phase of my learning career, for the 3 years I spent with him, he too was an important part of my learning process. All these important, illustrious scholars, they emphasize the fact that if I was to read the Quran, there's only one way of doing it, and that is to read it with an open mind, with deep reflection. So, when I was able to read the Quran properly, understand it properly, I felt that I was also, as a consequence, able to answer all the questions, or shall I say, most of the questions raised by people like Bertrand Russell. I am not claiming that my answers were the best answers that I was able to come up with. I am still at a very preliminary level of learning my religion. But what I can ensure all of you is that if you keep your mind open and if you continue to explore the questions beginning with why, the Quran will not disappoint you. In fact, you will get answers to your questions. And I firmly believe that what you call belief, what you call faith, is in actual fact the end result of your search for truth and the experience of reading the Quran and then getting answers to the questions that have been bothering you, troubling you. So, I have learned my religion as a consequence of a journey that I went through, and I'm still learning. And I wanted to share some of the ideas that I was able to grasp and understand with a larger audience. I'm so very thankful to Ghamdi Center of Islamic Learning for providing me with this opportunity, this platform, to let the understanding that I've got to be put across. In the later part of the presentations, obviously many questions would arise. And I would welcome and encourage all of you who are listening to these presentations to kindly come up with your questions, and let's share what we have in our mind, and let's improve our learning, understanding of our religion. I hope you will enjoy this series. I hope I'll be able to do justice with it. May God Almighty enable us to understand His religion as best as is possible.